But let's go back to that idea of having a licence to bully even the most harmless people. Antifa claims to be an anti-fascist group. In fact, it's fascist itself. It's responsible for political violence here and in America. And now, here is Antifa on the weekend in Canada, blockading a fundraiser that featured the leader of Canada's Conservative People's Party. And it was a meeting that had drawn a crowd of voters that included one poor old lady.
Nazis come off our streets! Nazis come off our streets! Off our streets! Let him go! Let him go! Let him go!
And joining me on What's Trending is Daisy Cousins, who runs her own video channel. Has also contributed to The Spectator Australia. Daisy, lovely to see you. What should we learn from that footage, do you think?
Well, what we can learn, Andrew, is that while Antifa relentlessly claims the moral high ground by claiming to be anti-fascist, we can learn that they actually have no morals, no principles, and certainly no sense of empathy. And what I think this footage proves, Andrew, is that to Antifa, the real threat isn't Nazis or fascists or white supremacists or whatever they scream about. The real threat to them is dissent. Here you have an elderly couple, that the woman was on a walker, for goodness sake, that could not have posed a physical threat if they tried, but yet they were attending an event that Antifa deems not acceptable. So therefore, according to Antifa, they are worthy of harassment and bullying and violent threats. And as for the event itself, which is screaming that it's a Nazi thing, it was a joint event to discuss free speech between Maxime Bernier, who is the head of the People's Party of Canada, and Dave Rubin, who is an extremely popular online commentator who's a classical liberal and, in fact, an ex-leftist. Nothing to do with Nazis or anything of the sort, but because it is a deviation from the Antifa anarcho-communist narrative, everyone who attends, and of course the speakers themselves, are demonized as evil and worthy of violent threats, including, it seems, a sweet little old couple who, like I said, could not pose a violent threat if they tried.
Well, there's one other thing, just looking at it again, that occurred to me. There were at least 3 people filming 3 young people, one of them a fairly burly guy and masked threateningly. There's 3 people abusing a very old and frail woman, and not one of the 3 people filming it stepped in to help her. I thought that was rather shocking. But anyway, the Greta Thunberg phenomenon, Daisy, and a 16-year-old, a climate crusader, telling adults how to run their very complex industrial economies without coal. And this phenomenon, by the way, of child prophets is not new. It's been brought to my attention nearly 30 years ago. A 12-year-old girl, Seven Colours Suzuki, who's daughter of the Canadian environmentalist David Suzuki, also lectured adults, this time at the Rio Summit, another UN fandango, lectured them about the end of the world. Have a listen.
I am fighting for my future. Losing my future is not like losing an election or a few points on the stock market. I am here to speak for all generations to come. I am here to speak on behalf of the starving children around the world whose cries go unheard. I am here to speak for the countless animals dying across this planet because they have nowhere left to go.
Now, Daisy is 30 years on. That 12-year-old is still alive. The animals are still alive. Starvation is actually at record lows. Grain crops have never been bigger than this decade. But why don't we learn the lesson? You know, here we go again with yet another child prophet preaching doom for animals and humans.
God, I know. Look, adults have always used children to galvanise other adults into supporting particular causes. Charities do it, for instance. Not necessarily a bad thing to galvanise adults to give to charities, but they talk about, say, child poverty instead of poverty because, of course, suffering children elicit a huge amount of empathy from adult responders, and understandably, because they're dependent on adults for survival, and who wouldn't want to give children a good future? So, of course, when it comes to climate change alarmists who have their own kind of whole nother agenda, using children on the front lines kind of makes sense. But look, I'm a climate centrist, Andrew, okay? I believe in listening to all the arguments on all sides of the debate to come to the best possible conclusion. And what we do about climate change is nowhere near as cut and dry as these child prophets are telling us, or perhaps are being told. For example, 500 scientists signed a letter recently to the United Nations Attorney General decrying the alarmism that they were putting into their climate change rhetoric, saying there is no climate emergency, and demanding a debate in 2020 between scientists on both sides of the aisle to really nut out this climate change issue once and for all, which of course is not being reported on. And to distract from this kind of dissent within the community, the alarmists dangle children out the front, pop them on the front lines and dare their opponents to criticise them.
That is exactly correct. I mean, on that point, I was listening to ABC presenter John Fain, who's of the Green Left, today saying how terrible it was that commentators are attacking Greta Thunberg, you know, when in fact we're criticising her message. You know, they put a girl up and make her say all these amazing things. We say, no, she's wrong and this and this and this and this. And, oh, how dare you, you know. And then we had New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern today also upset with Thunberg being questioned and suggesting that perhaps she might be a more worthy recipient of the Nobel Prize than herself. Have a listen.
I do think we need climate advocates. And I think, you know, it's certainly couldn't be easy having been thrust onto the world stage in that way. But I have deep admiration for her.
So there you go again, Daisy. What's your response to the left first choosing Thunberg to spread their global warming gospel, and then, having privileged her like that, put her up in the UN, savaging commentators for daring to disagree with it?
Well, Andrew, this attitude from the left really does make me giggle, because what these pearl clutchers have failed to realise is that by insisting that anyone who criticises Greta's ideas is somehow a terrible person because how dare you attack a child, they're actually being incredibly disrespectful of her and incredibly patronising. Greta Thunberg, whether we agree with her or not, is an incredibly intelligent girl. She's very, very driven, and she has put herself into the arena of political ideology and politics and climate change, which is a very, very adult arena. What she's done by doing that is insist that adults take her seriously as they would another adult. And with that, you've got to expect that if the adults who agree with you are taking you seriously, well, guess what? The adults who disagree with you are also going to take you seriously and are going to treat you as an adult. And with that comes legit criticism of of your ideas, which is very, very different to personal criticism. So what's so ironic here, Andrew, that it's actually Greta's critics like you and myself who are showing her much more respect than her supporters, who are coddling her and saying, oh goodness, don't talk to her in case you hurt her feelings. She's a child. It's quite funny, actually, that that kind of complex they have.
Yeah, but look, it is, in fact, I think, a great piece of dishonesty and also cowardice. As I showed you, the UN has got form for this. They give a platform to someone who's a child to say what they, the adults, once said, then pretend to be outraged when people question it because it came from a girl. Now, the girl is actually running the alarmist script that they've given her themselves. And this is, I think, a way to try and build a little special immunity from debate, and I think it's ultimately dishonest. This is adults hiding behind a girl to present an alarmist and dishonest argument.
Oh, I fully agree. That's exactly what they're doing, and it is completely transparent and, as you say, dishonest. I saw this wonderful tweet, Andrew, since this is a segment called Trending Now, but it was just by a random person a little bit of a while ago, who said, if you can no longer defend your position, march children onto the front lines and dare your opponents to attack them. And I thought, my goodness, this sums up this situation absolutely perfectly with Greta. They have run the alarmist narrative again and again and again. People have been totally put off by it because of the sort of hysterical nature of it. They're losing people. So what do? They find this poor girl, this golden girl, who is very difficult to criticise, not just because she's a teenager, but because she's a girl and because she has Asperger's. So there's that as well. They've plopped her onto the front lines and are using her age as some kind of human shield, when, as you mentioned, she's saying the exact things that they want her to say. It is just so abhorrent and so intellectually lazy, and aside from anything else, goodness knows what lasting damage Greta Thunberg is going to have to endure after going through all of this at such a young age.
And just before I go, are you going to be applauding the Mayor of Wagga Wagga as he drives an electric car to Sydney, taking at least an hour longer on the journey because it's got to wait for his to recharge halfway through, to save the planet when the car is, by the way, using coal-fired electricity in the first place?
Well, you know what, Andrew? I hope he drives safely. I hope he has a lovely time. I hope he sees some lovely scenery. And look, sure, that it's a little bit ironic the car is using coal-fired electricity, but good on him for expressing his platform, and I hope he has a lovely time on the way.
And may it save the island of Tonga that he claims is the one piece of evidence he gave that, oh, that's global warming. A bit of erosion in Tonga, and suddenly, when most islands in the Pacific are growing or stable, that is his evidence. Anyway, Daisy Cousins, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.